The plan had been forged in the paranoia of the Cold War. Just 2 years earlier, Castro had led a successful revolution in Cuba, ousting the US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista. At first, many in the West viewed Castro as a nationalist reformer, but soon, he aligned himself with the Soviet Union, nationalized US businesses, and began spreading revolutionary ideals throughout Latin America. To Washington, this was intolerable. A communist government just 90 miles from Florida, the Eisenhower administration and later President John F. Kennedy were determined to act. The CIA proposed a bold solution: arm Cuban exiles, train them in secret, and land them in Cuba where, it was believed, the population would rise up against Castro. It was a dangerous assumption. The operation, codenamed Operation Zapata, began with CIA training camps in Guatemala and Nicaragua. The exiles, many former soldiers or Batista loyalists, were promised US air support and a swift, victorious campaign. They believed they were liberators. They had no idea they were walking into disaster. On April 15th, 2 days before the landing, US-painted planes flown by exiles bombed Cuban airfields in a failed attempt to cripple Castro's air force. The strikes were limited and ineffective, and worse, they alerted Havana. Castro mobilized his forces and arrested thousands of suspected dissidents. Then, in the early hours of April 17th, the exiles landed at the Bahia de Cochinos, the Bay of Pigs. From the very beginning, things went wrong. The invaders encountered unexpected coral reefs, bogging down their landing craft. Communication failed, ammunition ran low. Worse, the Cuban military responded with swift, overwhelming force. Tanks rolled in, militia surrounded the beaches, and the Cuban Air Force, far from neutralized, bombarded the invasion force relentlessly. The promised US air support never came. President Kennedy, fearing escalation with the Soviet Union and further international backlash, refused to authorize direct military intervention. The invaders were left alone. After 3 days of intense fighting, nearly all the exiles were killed or captured. Over 1,100 men were taken prisoner. The Cuban government celebrated the victory as a triumph against imperialism. Castro emerged more powerful than ever, his grip on Cuba unshakable. In Washington, the fallout was immediate. Kennedy, just 3 months into his presidency, took full responsibility. Privately, he was furious with the CIA, military planners, and his advisors. Publicly, he admitted, "Victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeat is an orphan." The Bay of Pigs became a defining moment in Cold War history. It deepened the rift between the United States and Cuba, pushing Castro firmly into Moscow's orbit. Just a year later, the world would face the Cuban Missile Crisis, bringing it to the brink of nuclear war. For the CIA, the operation was a lesson in hubris, an over-reliance on covert action, flawed assumptions, and the belief that American power alone could shape foreign revolutions. It also marked the beginning of more aggressive United States covert operations throughout Latin America and beyond. But for the Cuban exiles who landed on that beach, it was a different story, one of betrayal, defeat, and the bitter taste of promises unfulfilled. In the end, the Bay of Pigs wasn't just a failed invasion. It was a moment when the limits of American power were laid bare, and the Cold War burned a little hotter.